Well, hello and welcome to Ideological. I am a smart guy, Zach Lee, your host. Hope that you are doing great. Today, we're going to be asking a very fundamental question, which is, what is philosophy? It's a huge topic. I'm the director of the Institute for the Study of Philosophy, Politics, and Culture. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what philosophy is and what it is not. And so hopefully this will be helpful for you. So, first of all, let's talk about some definitions. The word philosophy comes from two Greek words, phileo and sophia. So it's technically the love of wisdom. That doesn't really give you any information on what philosophy is. If I just say it's the love of wisdom, you're like, I love wisdom. Great. We're crushing it. We're doing philosophy. It's really notoriously difficult to define philosophy because it's not a topic like any other topic. It's kind of the topic that stands above or stands behind every other topic. It's the topic that makes the study of every other topic possible. But let's give a few definitions here. Webster's dictionary, that's like what every sixth grader that's writing a paper does. They start by saying, well, Webster's dictionary defines politics, and they just say that. Webster is very unhelpful sometimes. They've got several definitions of philosophy. One definition, and these are opposite ends of the spectrum. One definition is all learning exclusive of technical precepts and practical arts. So if I say to you, which is a great definition, actually, we'll see why, because technical precepts and practical arts are like practically how you do something. Philosophy is the stuff that stands behind that or underneath it. And so it's not a terrible definition. It's just horrendously vague, right? If you're like, what is philosophy? I'm like, it's all knowledge that's not technical. It doesn't really answer your question. As another definition, they just say the pursuit of wisdom. Again, not the best definition. It's really great. Both the definitions are 100% correct, and they tell you nothing about what the academic study of philosophy is. Alvin Plantinga, who's a professor I really like, he used to teach at Notre Dame. He defines it as thinking really hard about something. That's not a terrible definition. Philosophy is just when you're thinking really hard about it. So if you are eating sushi, and then you're thinking really hard about sushi, now you're doing a philosophy of sushi. So thinking really hard about something. I'll give you some that are a little bit better. So more precisely, we can define philosophy as the study of truth, reality, knowledge, religion, morality, justice, and beauty. You'll notice those topics, they have fancier names, right? Logic, metaphysics, epistemology, theology, or philosophy of religion, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. But you'll realize those are unlike most topics. Like usually when you study something, you're not studying things like reality. You're not studying things like knowledge. You're not studying things like ethics. You're studying something more concrete, more physical probably. If you're a biologist, you're studying life, like animals and plants and this kind of stuff. That's very different than saying, let's study aesthetics. Let's study what makes something beautiful and why. My favorite definition of philosophy comes from a professor at Stanford. His name's David Hills, and he says this: philosophy is the art of asking questions that come naturally to children using methods that come naturally to lawyers. Oh, I'm going to read that again. It's such a good definition. Philosophy is the art of asking questions that come naturally to children using methods that come naturally to lawyers. You're asking questions that children ask in the sense that children ask really big questions. They just keep asking why. Or they'll have questions that are even category mistakes. They'll be like, Dad, what color is time? And if it's a boy, I just say blue, and a girl pink just to keep it easy. But time doesn't have a color, right? But you're using methods that come naturally to lawyers. It's argumentative. You're building a case. It's very rigorous. It's very logical. It takes into account alternate evidence, all that kind of stuff. So if I had to give my own definition of philosophy, just to keep it very simple, I would just say it's similar to what's called aletheology, which is the study of truth. Aletheia, meaning the Greek word for truth. It's the study of truth. What is true, and how do we know it? That's really what philosophy is trying to figure out. What is true in any field, and how do we know it? Philosophy is all about argumentation. I don't mean like when you get into a fight with your spouse. I mean where you make a case. You have back and forth dialectic. That's really what philosophy is all about. Now, what is it that makes philosophy so unique? It's very unlike other disciplines. So I'll give you a few examples. Biology, from the study of life, technically. Bios is a word for life in addition to zoe in Greek. So biology is the study of like living things, animals and plants. You can have subsets like botany and this kind of stuff. And that's what it studies. What is it limited to? Pretty much just that. You don't go to a biologist to figure out what's going to happen in the economy. You don't go to a biologist to figure out, what type of religion you should have. You don't go to a biologist to figure out. So they study life and living things more specifically, but they're very limited to that field. That's really what they can talk about. They can talk about plants, animals, medicine. They could talk about tiny things like germs. This is all biology. Or cardiology, right? From the word cardia, meaning heart. What does it study? Well, it studies the heart. A cardiologist works on your heart. But to what is it limited? Just basically the heart and things related to the heart. That doctor knows other things about your body, but again, he's not the person you go to for political opinions as an expert, at least in politics. He's not the person that you go to for history or something like that. It's very limited. Or anthropology. What does that study? And don't say the store that sells women's clothes. That's with an IE at the end. We're talking about anthropology, the study of anthropos, man. They typically look at cultures in the ancient world. They typically look at what was culture and society and civilization like many years ago. It's the study of man, anthropology. What's it limited to, though? That. It doesn't really go beyond that field, okay? Psychology, what is that? This is actually a trickier one. I'm going to have a whole episode on psychology and what it is and what it's not and how it can be helpful, but sometimes how it overstates its case. Technically, it's the study of the soul. Psychology comes from the Greek word psyche, which means soul. But really, the way we define it today is it's the study of kind of your internal life, your mental life, your emotions, your feelings, your cognitive experiences. It's different than neurology, which is brain science, which is really studying your mental life. It's different than that, but it's limited to that. The psychologist cannot tell you about other fields, at least not as an expert, unless they're trained in those other fields as well. Philosophy is different than every other field of study. Every other field of study, it studies one thing and it takes philosophy kind of for granted and it just jumps in there and it's kind of limited to that. Philosophy is unlike all these other fields of study, and I could have named 1,000 others. It studies everything. There's nothing in which philosophy doesn't get a say. It's limited to nothing, okay? It's more of a method than a particular field of study. These other things I mentioned are particular fields of study. Philosophy is the method and the case and the logic and the assumptions and the argumentation that you kind of have to study any topic, right? Before you can look at a little organism in biology, you have to ask this question: how do I know my eyes are giving me correct information? How do I know the organism that I see in the Petri dish is the same as the one that I see in this thought in my mind? That's all philosophy, okay? It studies the most basic things, which is another thing that makes it different than other fields. When you're talking about things like reality, what is, that's very different than like what type of valve in your heart is not opening properly. And it also doesn't necessarily give you answers. That's really interesting. So in Bertrand Russell's book, The Problems of Philosophy, he basically says that philosophy doesn't give you a lot of the answers. The benefit is it gives you a method. It lets you exclude certain bad things. It opens your mind. It teaches you to reason. It teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to do all these other things. It's not just that it just gives you the answers. I actually like the episodes where I don't give you answers. I just kind of give you some interesting things to think about and then stress you out and you can go talk to your friends about it. Those are my favorite types of episodes. It gives you more of a method than it does just parroting answers to you. Let me give you a few examples. Since we're talking about what is philosophy. A scientist might say something like this: light is electromagnetic radiation that can be perceived by the eye. That sounds like something a scientist would say. A philosopher is still going to talk about light, still going to talk about the eye, but in a very different way. The philosopher might say something like this: do you and I see light the exact same way? Why do we see light even when we're dreaming? Think about it. You're dreaming, your eyes are closed, you're in a dark room, and yet you're in a room full of light talking to people or whatever your dream is about. For me, I'm just naked and flying. That's just 100% of my dreams. It's actually pretty amazing. And but that's a philosophy question, right? Or a philosopher might say something like, if everyone were blind, would we even know that light exists? They're still dealing with light, but these questions that are like way behind it. Philosophy is kind of like the skeleton, and every other field is like the muscle. Or philosophy is kind of like the framing of the house, and every other field is a different building component, windows or sheetrock or whatever. An artist, for example, would say, this painting is beautiful. A philosopher says, is beauty objective or is it subjective? What makes something beautiful? If someone thinks hurting children is beautiful, can we say that they're objectively wrong, or do we have to say, no, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? We're still dealing with beauty. We're still looking at art, but we're asking different questions about it. We're asking the questions behind the questions. Philosophy is the thing you have to take for granted before you can ask any of the other questions in any other field. Philosophy owns all the other fields. It's a great field of study. A doctor says you should drink less alcohol if you want to be healthy. That's something a doctor can say. Health, bodily health, is in their field of study. The philosopher, though, is going to say, wait a second, doctor, is the goal of life to be as healthy as you can be? Is it to live as long as you can, or is it to live an enjoyable life? Maybe you should drink more and die earlier. Maybe you should smoke cigars more and die earlier. What happiness will I give up by trying to be healthy? So the doctor can speak in the area of health. The philosopher has to say, well, wait, is health a value, though? When we're doing value judgments, we're doing philosophy. A priest can say, believe in God, and a philosopher can say, what rational proofs are there for God's existence? How do you know them? Or they could say, are you arguing in a circle when you use the Bible to prove the Bible? Or conversely, they could say, well, maybe God exists because a bunch of stuff coming from nothingness and being here forever doesn't make much sense, and here's other proofs, against atheism or whatever. You can philosophers, there'll be both believing and non-believing philosophers that are both brilliant. A politician would say something like this: there's too much income inequality. And a philosopher asks, is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? Why'd you just say that that's a bad? Shouldn't some people make more than others? Like, especially if their work is more valuable? Or should we say no? Yes, it's terrible that people have different incomes. Everyone should have the same income, and then make a case for it. That's actually a philosophical claim that the politician's making. So I'm just giving you a few examples to say philosophy deals with all the other things you need to even ask a question in another field. You understand that, like, let's use the scientific method, okay? That you're going to believe what you can perceive through one of your five senses, something like that. That method itself, what I just said, that sentence, I will believe what I can prove empirically, is kind of another rendition of the scientific method. There's actually several versions of it. There's not just one, unless you're like, Zach, you didn't say the correct scientific method. There's not one. There's several. Again, you had a presupposition. That's philosophy. If I say, hey, the scientific method is, I will believe what I can prove through empirical knowledge, through my senses, through what I can see under a microscope, through whatever. I didn't come up with that sentence by using my senses. I didn't come up with the scientific method by using the scientific method. It was philosophy. It's even something I had to bring to the table to start doing science. We'll have a whole episode on philosophy of science, by the way. What does science have to take for granted? Where is it a system of belief and not just objective facts? What topics does philosophy really study? Well, it studies everything. You can have a philosophy of war. You can have a philosophy of hunting. You can have a philosophy of kink. You can have a philosophy of all kinds of stuff. But typically, the big areas in philosophy are as follows. Reality, what is called metaphysics. It's called metaphysics not because it means something like, I feel like if you go to a bookstore, the metaphysics section always has like witchcraft and like teenage zombie novels or something. Metaphysics comes from, I think it's Aristotle's teaching that he gave after physics, metaphysis, after physics, so it became called metaphysics. But it has to do with reality. What actually is real? What actually exists? Out of what is everything made? Well, Zach, they're made of atoms. What are the atoms made of? Well, they're made of leptons. What are leptons made of? They're made of quarks. Cool. What is a quark made of? I don't know. Cool. You didn't really answer my question then. Okay. Quarks are made up of half quarks and quarter quarks and eighth quarks, and you can just keep conceptually dividing them forever. That's not my question. My question is, what is everything made of? These are all questions of metaphysics. Philosophy also studies knowledge, or what's called epistemology, the study of understanding or knowledge. How do we know things? What is true? What is a belief? What can we verify? How do I know that I'm not in a dream right now is a great epistemological question. I don't think that I'm in a dream. It's very hard to prove, though, right? So what do we know? What counts as real knowledge and what is not? If somebody says an angel came to them in a dream and told them this thing was going to happen, is that real knowledge? Is that on the same level of seeing something with your eyes? What about when you're hallucinating, though? You're seeing things with your eyes, but you're not. You're seeing them with your mind, and your mind is off. So these are all knowledge-y types questions. Science, scientia, different kind of word for a different type of knowledge. Philosophy of science will ask questions like, what things are we taking for granted? Are these systems that we're building real, or do they just help us understand the problem? Where are the limits of science? Does science get better over time, or does it just replace different systems before it? Anyway, these kind of questions will be in philosophy of science. Religion, obviously, will deal with you'll deal with religious topics when you're dealing with philosophy. Does God exist? If so, which God? What about the problem of evil? If God is good and all-powerful, why is there evil in the world? What about miracles? Is that where God is interrupting the natural laws that he's put up? Wouldn't he be a better clockmaker if he didn't have to step into the clock? Or does it make him better because he steps into time and does some miracle? These are all good philosophy questions. Origen, the early church father, actually said, no one can truly do duty to God who does not think like a philosopher. Who am I? I don't mean this in like an emo way, like you shop at Hot Topic and you draw pictures of killing people and you're like, who am I? I mean, like, what makes me me? If I lose my hair, I'm still Zach, but not if I become an alien or I'm vaporized. What is essential to me? Is there a real me? If you put my brain in somebody else's body, are they me? Is it my body that's me? Is it my mind that's me? What if I lose all my memories? Am I still me? Am I just material, like my body and matter? Or do I also have an immaterial part, a soul or a mind? Is there a central me, or am I just a collection of experiences, right? Like if you just describe me, I have a beard and a nose and hands and a liver and hair and all these kind of things. But then there's no essential me. I'm just a bundle of different attributes, a bundle of different qualities. Is that me? These are all questions of self-justice. This has to do with politics. What should the role of government be? Not what is it? What should it be? What actually is justice? What actually is fairness? Right? Is it treating everyone the same under the law, or is it giving everybody the same stuff at the end of the day? Should we allow a majority to overcome a minority if there are more votes? All these kind of politics is a very spicy topic, but what nobody does is try to figure out the philosophy behind it of what a government should be. They just start arguing about political topics instead of saying what should be the role of government. They just kind of jump into global warming or guns or whatever their hot topic is. That's a pun, I guess, actually, by the way, with global warming. And so it's a hot topic. So politics, justice is something you're going to deal with in philosophy. What about beauty? Aesthetics. Is the point of life to have knowledge, or is it to have experiences? Is it to see a beautiful painting? If I take my grandmother's skull and I put it in a tub of urine, can I call it art? And you can't say that I'm wrong because you think beauty is subjective. Is it objective? Are some people objectively ugly? And you can go up to them and say, hey, listen, if God exists, he also thinks you're ugly. That's how objectively ugly you are. People have done that to me, my whole life. So these are the kind of things we study in philosophy. You'll notice these topics are different than when you're just studying music, or when you're just studying architecture, or when you're studying whatever it might be. So is philosophy practical? So sometimes what people, first of all, I don't know if you realize this or not, but everybody's a philosopher. If I'm saying that philosophy is the study of truth and what makes things true and reality and knowledge and beauty and ethics and all of that, we're all doing that all the time. We're all making a decision not to murder people all day. Some of you might be making the decision to murder, which is also makes you a philosopher. It makes you a murdery one, but also a philosopher. And so the question you have to ask is, okay, is this just, everyone's a philosopher. The question is not, are you a philosopher? You are. It's, are you a good one? And the answer is probably no. So be a better philosopher. Okay. It will make your life better in every area. But that leads to another question, which is philosophy practical? So some people think, Zach, this is very head in the clouds thinking. When we're asking questions like, what does it mean to be? Is that even practical? They don't even understand that question itself is philosophy. It's called pragmatism. It says the only thing that's valuable is what works. What they're saying is what works is what's good. They're making an ethical claim. And so I don't care about just these thinking. What makes me more money? What makes me stronger? What gives me a bigger house? That's what matters. That's a philosophical claim. Maybe the purpose of life is not to just do things that work and be miserable. Maybe there's deeper purposes. Also, I think philosophy is extremely practical. I think it's the most practical thing in the world. If you want to be good at anything else, study philosophy. If you're good at philosophy, you'll be good at everything else. You'll know how to learn. You'll know how to think. You'll know how to argue. You'll know how to reason. You'll know how to write things out in mathematical, logical formulas so you can see which politician's right. You don't have to think, well, you think they're right and I think they're wrong. You can know who's right with mathematical certainty. Holy crap. Okay? So I think it's extremely practical because it touches on every area of life. If you're a good thinker, this is going to affect your finances. It's going to affect your family. It's going to affect your business. It's going to affect your stress. It's going to affect your anxiety. It's going to affect all of it. I think philosophy is the most practical thing you can study, despite the fact that it doesn't study what's practical. Okay? Deal with it. How is philosophical history typically classified? So there's a lot of great thinkers throughout history. Philosophy is an enormous topic, and it's not confined, like I said, to just one thing. But it's typically broken up into four main stages. So you have ancient philosophy. These are the Greeks, typically. And the main question they're trying to ask, this is just such a gross oversimplification. But the main question they're trying to ask is, how do I live a life of human flourishing, right? So if an acorn's trying to turn into a mighty oak and have birds nest in its branches and reach towards the sky, that's kind of like the goal of the tree. The goal of a human is to be an excellent human. It's human flourishing, okay? This is really what the ancients are trying to ask. A lot of Greek philosophy has to do with what does it mean to be an excellent type of human, to have magnanimity, to have great souledness. So there's medieval philosophy after that, and this is primarily in the Christian tradition, but you also get Judaic and Islamic philosophy as well. They're primarily trying to ask the question of, how can the tools of philosophy assist theology? So this is true with somebody like Aquinas, but it's also true with somebody like Maimonides, or it's true with somebody like Averroes, right? So there's a Christian, Jewish, and Muslim thinker. After that, you have what happens in the Enlightenment. You get early modern philosophy. The main thing that they're asking, so in ancient philosophy, how do we live a life of human flourishing? They're asking other things. This is just a simplification. Medieval philosophy, how do I use the tools in philosophy to assist theology? Okay, I already have a belief system, and I want to take the tools of philosophy to make that better. There was actually a popular phrase in the Middle Ages that philosophy is the handmaid of theology, right? The handmaid is there to help theology. In the early modern world, which is the Enlightenment, okay, so this is really like Bacon and Descartes through Kant, who's an anti-Enlightenment figure, but we'll have another lesson on Kant. How the question they're asking is how to use reason and science to practically better human lives. So notice it takes a very practical spin. And they're trying to break free from religious superstition. So that's really what they're focused on in the early modern period. And then there is modern philosophy, which it breaks into two big schools of thought, what's called continental and analytic. But what they're trying to figure out in the modern period, so this is after the early modern period, so like early 1800s moving forward to today, how can philosophy apply to the questions of human existence and society? That's the continental stream. Or how can we best analyze language and logic to untangle our philosophical problems? That would be on the analytic side, okay? And then there's a fifth category, which I don't know actually constitutes a different time period in philosophical history, but I'll include it just for completeness' sake. Postmodern philosophy, which really asks a very different kind of question. We've got a whole episode on postmodernism. I love it. I get real spicy. It's one of the few episodes where I just say, here's my opinion, and I hate this. So find out why, though. You still have to read certain postmodern thinkers. They have some good things to say, even if I think most of what they say is ridiculous. But postmodern philosophy asks a different question. It asks this: how can they show that much of philosophy was just a power play to oppress others? Notice how the themes of power dynamics and politics play into that so much. That's not just trying to figure out what's true, which is what most other philosophers have done throughout Western history. It's playing a very different type of game. Where should I start? Okay, well let's talk about where should we start. So you want to get into philosophy, you're new to it. Let's recommend a few books. One is my book, Selfless, Shameless Promotion, Courting Athena. Who's Athena? She's the goddess of wisdom. You get it? Phileo, Sophia, the love of wisdom. Courting Athena is about chasing wisdom. It's an introduction to philosophy. Some have called this the greatest book in philosophy of all time, and by some I mean me. Let me just read you some of the people that endorsed this. Elon Musk endorsed this. Bertrand Russell, before he died, endorsed this. Oprah, it's also on her favorite book list. Didn't know if you knew that. Brad Pitt, obviously so handsome, he endorsed this. Ryan Reynolds endorsed this. He actually signed this copy with his Deadpool mask on. So there's that. I highly recommend. If you're looking for a great introduction with some primary text in it, I highly recommend Introducing Philosophy. This is the 9th edition. I think the current one's the 11th edition. It's Kathleen Higgins and Robert Solomon. I think Solomon passed away recently, so I think it's Higgins that's taken it over. Great introduction to philosophy if you want people that are better than me. Highly recommend this one. And then one more. I should have pulled these down before I started. If you want a great introduction to the history of philosophy, this is more intellectual history than it is philosophy. Anthony Kinney, who is just a stud. He's an Oxford Don. He's also knighted, Sir Anthony Kinney. A New History of Western Philosophy. It comes in 4 volumes, or you can get this beefy, just ridiculously thick, one volume. Highly recommend. It's a great intro to the history of philosophy. It's a great way to study philosophy by looking at it through a historical lens, so you can kind of see who's responding to whom and all that kind of stuff. So those are some great places to start. However, those are all secondary resources. I'm a big primary resources guy. So on the Institute for the Study of Philosophy, Politics, and Culture website, there are some blogs where I have primary resources that I recommend for each area of philosophical history, or the history of philosophy is a better way to say that. So I have the primary sources you should read for the ancient world. I have the primary sources you should look at for the Middle Ages. I have the primary sources that you should look at for early modern period, and then also for the modern period. So who are? Let's just list some of these people. These are names you've probably heard. Again, impress your friends. Who are some major philosophers throughout history? Let me just give you some names that you probably have heard of. In ancient philosophy, first of all, you have what are called the pre-Socratics. These are the guys before Socrates, hence the name. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to list all of them. You can actually get a pre-Socratics reader by Hackett, which is very, very helpful. Highly would recommend. But these would be guys like Thales, Anaximander, Heraclitus, Parmenides, and others. But the big thinkers in the ancient world when it comes to philosophy that I'd recommend, there's more than this. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just a very helpful list. Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Cicero, Lucretius, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, the good emperor from Gladiator, Sextus Empiricus, always awesome to have the word sex in your first name, and Plotinus, who's kind of the end of the ancient pagan tradition before you get into a lot of Christian philosophy. In the medieval period, it's Augustine of Hippo, Boethius, Pseudo-Dionysius, Avicenna, St. Anselm, Peter Abelard, Averroes, Moses Maimonides, Bonaventure, Thomas Aquinas, St. Thomas, John Duns Scotus, William of Ockham, and then Erasmus, Desiderius Erasmus, the great humanities scholar that whose version of the New Testament guys would go on to use for the Protestant Reformation. Early modern period, who are some major players? Well, we've got obviously Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, René Descartes, Benedict or Baruch Spinoza, whether you want to use his Latinized or Jewish name, John Locke, Nicolas Malebranche, Isaac Newton, the Apple guy, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, that I say in a very Germany way, Pierre Bayle, Bernard Mandeville, George Berkeley. Every time I see that, I want to say Charles Barkley, but that's not it. It's George Berkeley. Voltaire, Francois-Marie Arouet is his real name, but Voltaire, David Hume, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We've got a whole episode on Rousseau, Adam Smith, and Immanuel Kant. And then in the modern period, Jeremy Bentham, Hegel, Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Arthur Schopenhauer, John Stuart Mill, Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Henri Bergson, Edmund Husserl, Bertrand Russell, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Jürgen Habermas. Now, there are more than that, but that is a great starting list of who's who in the philosophy world. So what, Zach? Why are we doing it? Why does this matter? Why is philosophy important? Well, I want to give you a few quotes to kind of make the point of why philosophy is important, other than it's what you're doing all the time and it affects everything and everything. The quote that's often attributed to Socrates is, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Okay, so supposedly, they're like, Socrates, stop all your teaching, you're corrupting the youth, we're going to kill you. And he's like, listen, I can't stop doing philosophy because that would not be a life that's worth living. The unexamined life is not worth living. So ask yourself that. If you could not think deeply, if you could not know truth and you just went throughout life, even if you had a bunch of money, would you be happy? Is ignorance bliss? Or is the life of the mind the best type of life? Bertrand Russell says most people would sooner die than think. In fact, they do so, which is a great quote. One of my favorite ones that comes from, I think this comes from Seneca. It says this: "Of all men, they alone are at leisure who take time for philosophy. They alone really live. For they are not content to be good guardians of their own lifetime only. They annex every age to their own. All the years that have gone before them are an addition to their store." And then I'm going to end with a quote from, again, my book, the greatest philosophy book. By the way, I think my book is great. The editor left some proofreading errors, and I paid someone to proofread them, and they didn't catch them. And then I asked them if I could pay another proofreader, and they said no. and there's some errors. So don't get mad at me, get mad at them. But I want to end with a quote from this bad boy on what philosophy is. Here we go. Here's the quote. Philosophy won't let you pretentiously take things for granted. Philosophy won't allow for lazy, imprecise, or sloppy thinking. Philosophy makes you work. Now listen to this. It is only after you have read, written, wrestled, doubted, become confused, been beaten in an argument, questioned God, fallen into despair, lost friends, challenged your deepest beliefs, and thrown something across the room in anger that you have begun to do philosophy. So I would encourage you to think deeply. It will be stressful at times. This is a magnifying glass. If you learn how to think, things will be better and worse. The scary things are scarier and the good things are even better. So that's my challenge to you. Thanks for tuning in on this episode of Ideological, and I hope you have a great one.